Teresa kept her job as a cleaner a secret from her husband. However, when she comes across a photo on the bedside table of a wealthy family, she finds herself intrigued by the people depicted in the image. What seemed to be just a photo would trigger the revelation of a secret involving her husband, opening doors to a mystery from the past. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is the Linda's Stories channel. I hope you enjoy this story. The gentle sound of the alarm clock echoed through the house, breaking the morning silence and announcing the start of a new day. As was her custom, Teresa leaned over her husband Richard and placed a gentle kiss on his face to wake him up. She then headed to the children's rooms. Teresa and Richard were blessed with 4 amazing children. The eldest, at 12 years old, already showed signs of independence. Next was the 10-year-old son, full of enthusiasm for life. The youngest of the trio, 8 years old, displayed his relentless curiosity about the world around him. And, to the family's surprise, the youngest, 2 years old, arrived unexpectedly, bringing even more joy and energy into the home. In those early hours of the morning, Teresa's house transformed into a stage of delightful chaos. The children ran from one side to the other, busy with preparations for another school day, while the husband hurried to get ready for work. One asked for help finding the uniform, another frantically searched for a missing pair of socks, and the third seemed to have lost his backpack somewhere in the house. Surprisingly, when the clock's hand pointed to departure time, everyone was ready to face another day full of commitments. After the boys left for school and her husband went off for another day of work, Teresa was alone with her youngest. She loved the life of a mother and wife, feeling complete as she cared for her precious family. However, in recent months, an unsettling feeling had begun to gnaw at her heart. Her husband had lost his previous job, which provided them with a good salary, and was now working in a job that did not pay as well. This change had tightened the family's finances considerably. Teresa constantly expressed her concern to her husband, insisting that she was willing to find a job to help ease the financial pressure weighing on them. Her husband always reassured her, saying it was not necessary for her to worry about these matters, that he needed to take on the responsibility of resolving the family's financial situation. One day, upon returning from the market, Teresa came across a flyer announcing a job vacancy as a cleaner. The job description caught her attention. The hours were quite suitable for her routine, and the workplace was not far from her home. Driven by the need to contribute financially to the family, she decided to leave her little daughter in the care of her mother, who lived on the same street, and headed to the address indicated in the advertisement. Upon arriving at the house, she found herself facing a large and imposing structure surrounded by a well-kept garden. She was received by Mrs. Evelyn, a trusted employee of the residence, who conducted the job interview in a friendly manner. During the conversation, Teresa made an effort to demonstrate her interest and skills for the job. The interview seemed to be going positively until the woman discovered that Teresa had 4 children. With a somewhat concerned expression, the lady explained her hesitation. "I'm sorry, Teresa," she began. "I really liked you, but we have had previous experiences with employees who had children, and they often needed to be absent due to issues with the kids, such as illnesses or school meetings. I really need someone without distractions, someone who can fully dedicate themselves to the job." "Please, madam, I really need this job," Teresa pleaded. "My children rarely get sick, and my mother will take care of them while I'm working. Please grant me a trial opportunity for 1 month. If I do well, you can hire me permanently." Mrs. Evelyn pondered for a moment, and after reflecting on the situation, she finally decided to give that dedicated mother a chance and agreed to the 1-month trial period. Teresa felt a mixture of joy and a hint of apprehension after the lady's decision to give her a chance. She knew that her husband, Richard, would likely not approve of the idea of her working. She talked to her older children, who were old enough to understand the situation, and made a special request. Teresa asked them not to mention to their father that they were spending the afternoons at their grandmother's house after school. It was a secret she never imagined she would need to keep from Richard, but the need to help her family get through tough times drove her to make this difficult decision. The household routine remained unchanged. Every morning, Teresa would wake up early to wake everyone up, prepare breakfast, and give a loving goodbye to the boys and her husband before they left for their daily activities. She then took her daughter to her mother's house, who lived nearby, before heading to her own job, which was also conveniently located in the vicinity. In the afternoon, the boys would return from school and spend some time at their grandmother's house. After work, Teresa would pick them up and then move on to the chores at their own home, ensuring everything was in order before Richard, her husband, returned from work. It was an exhausting routine, but Teresa's determination to keep the family united and overcome financial difficulties kept her focused and resilient. In the house where Teresa worked, Mrs. Evelyn closely observed her, maintaining a watchful eye on every detail. The lady imposed clear limitations regarding the areas Teresa was allowed to access. She couldn't go upstairs where the owners' bedrooms were located. Her reach was limited to the ground floor and the garden. Even though the house was large, it felt empty, as if it were devoid of life. Teresa never saw the owners or any signs of human presence there. It was a peculiar atmosphere that sparked her curiosity. After a few weeks working at the residence, Mrs. Evelyn finally began to trust Teresa and assigned her to clean the second floor of the house. Teresa diligently performed her tasks, taking care of the guest rooms, the office, and the bathrooms with care and attention. However, when she finally entered the master bedroom, her heart nearly stopped in horror at what she saw on the nightstand. There, in a carefully placed photo, were her 4 children. It was the same photo her husband had posted on his social media a few months ago. Surprise and shock overwhelmed her as she tried to understand how an image of her own family had ended up in that unfamiliar house. Still reeling from the surprise, Teresa felt a gentle touch on her shoulder and turned to find Mrs. Evelyn. "Hey, Teresa, why are you standing there?" Evelyn questioned, noticing her disturbed expression. Teresa tried to disguise her agitation and responded carefully. "Sorry, I got a bit distracted. Do you happen to know who these children in the photo are?" She pointed to the image of her children on the nightstand. Evelyn seemed thoughtful for a moment and then replied, "I don't know who they are. The owners of the house are extremely reserved people and don't share details about their personal lives with the staff. They usually spend the day at the company and only return at night. A few months ago, the lady of the house placed that photo there, but I've never seen those children." Teresa felt even more intrigued and concerned. The situation was becoming increasingly enigmatic, and she knew she needed to investigate further to discover the connection between her family and that mysterious house. Teresa chose not to reveal the truth to Evelyn, keeping the secret that the children in the photo were her own. She was determined to avoid any situation that might lead to her dismissal, and therefore decided to keep this information to herself. That night, upon returning home, Teresa was torn between telling her husband about the mysterious photo or keeping the secret. The revelation would also mean sharing the secret of her job, something she had kept hidden. After all, Teresa was the one managing the household finances, and her husband hadn't noticed that little by little, all the debts were being paid off. Teresa chose to keep that mystery under lock and key, not knowing it was about to be unveiled. The next day started like any other, but upon arriving at the house where she worked, a surprise awaited her. "Teresa, the homeowners are planning a special dinner for some friends tonight, and I need you to work late to help in the kitchen. Would that be a problem for you?" asked Mrs. Evelyn. Teresa knew that if she refused, it might give the impression that she was unwilling to adapt to the work environment, something that could jeopardize her position there. "No problem at all, Mrs. Evelyn. I'm available to work as long as necessary." Teresa made a quick call to her mother, informing her that she would be late picking up the children from her house. However, what worried her the most at that moment was that she could no longer delay the inevitable conversation with Richard, her husband. She would finally have to reveal the secret of her job. That late afternoon, Teresa finally caught a glimpse of the homeowners from the corner of the kitchen door. They were a charming elderly couple, dressed elegantly and showing refined manners. In the middle of the dinner, Mrs. Elizabeth, the lady of the house, decided to go to the kitchen to fetch another bottle of wine. That's when her eyes met Teresa's for the first time, and she was frozen in surprise. "I know you," said Mrs. Elizabeth, her voice full of astonishment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I believe we have not been formally introduced. My name is Teresa, and I have been working at your house for a few weeks," Teresa replied, remaining humble. Mrs. Elizabeth seemed to ponder for a moment and then exclaimed, "You are Richard's wife, aren't you? I recognized you from the photo I saw on his social media." Mrs. Elizabeth's words revealed an unexpected connection, leaving Teresa stunned and uncertain about how to proceed with that surprising conversation. "Yes, I'm Richard's wife. Do you know him?" Teresa asked, confused. Mrs. Elizabeth sighed and, with a look full of emotion, confessed, "Yes, Richard is my son." The confession left Teresa completely astonished, revealing a truth she could never have imagined. Overcome by the shock of the revelation, Teresa simply left everything behind and ran back to her own house. When she arrived, she found her husband, Richard, who was already home and visibly upset. He had discovered, through Teresa's mother, that she had been secretly working. "Teresa, you deceived me for weeks, going to work without telling me," Richard reprimanded, with an expression of disappointment. Teresa, still reeling from the recent discovery, responded with a voice trembling with emotion. "Richard, I just found out that you lied to me throughout our entire relationship. You always told me your parents were dead, but I just met your mother." Richard sat down on the couch with his head lowered, feeling the weight of the truth he had hidden from Teresa for so long. Slowly, he began to share his story. He was born into a wealthy family and always enjoyed all the conveniences of life. He studied at good schools, travelled the world, but never managed to achieve anything on his own. Richard ended up working at his parents' company, but never stood out as a good employee. He frequently missed work, arrived late, and had a disrespectful attitude towards his colleagues. It was common for him to spend nights at parties and show up drunk to work. One day, his father, irritated with the situation, exploded in a reprimand in front of all the other employees. "Richard, you are a complete failure. You never valued all our effort, never achieved anything on your own merits. I am ashamed of you. Teresa, on that day I swore to myself that I would achieve everything through my own efforts, and it was at that moment that I met you and we started our beautiful family. My parents tried to contact me for a long time, but I never responded to them again." Richard confessed, his voice laden with regret and remorse. "Richard, I understand your past, but I believe it's time to leave it behind. Your parents have a picture of our children on their bedside table. They follow your social media. It seems they want to be part of our lives," said Teresa lovingly, hugging her husband. It was time for a new beginning. The next day, Richard, Teresa, and their 4 children drove to Richard's parents' house. When Mrs. Elizabeth saw them, she ran to the gate and hugged Richard as if he were just a child. Words were unnecessary at that moment, as love and emotion overflowed in every gesture. She hugged each of her grandchildren with genuine and affectionate care. Shortly after, Richard's father appeared. Amid warm embraces and words of apology, it was a truly emotional reunion. The tears, smiles, and tight hugs reunited a family that had been separated for so long. That day, the enormous house that had once remained silent and lifeless was flooded with the liveliness and joy of the children. The sound of laughter, games, and conversations filled every corner of the residence, transforming it into a place full of human warmth and love. Sometimes it is necessary to face the past and leave the hurts behind to build a happier and united future. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.